Well, I guess we only got one choice.
Go for it.
What finally killed the Dukes of Hazzard? Why did the Dukes of Hazzard go from being a top-rated hit to suddenly disappearing from TV? Did this dream team fall victim to a stone-cold numbers game? Or was there a conspiracy from the higher-ups? We follow the money and the inside scoop to the tragic downfall. Welcome, I am your host, Nostalgic Nick. We're here to get to the bottom of what ended the Dukes of Hazzard's legendary TV run. So without further ado, let's drive. Behind-the-scenes fatigue, and too much of a good thing. It's the bane of the biggest dreams, the most comfortable routines, the thing that turns normal into a nightmare. You know it, you dread it, it's the plain old burnout.
He's got it. Yeah.
And after 6 seasons of intense filming schedules, many of the cast and crew were just tired. This show was a massive commitment, and it's no wonder that the people involved were ready to move on to new projects, even though the cast loved each other and had great camaraderie. Let's face it, working on a TV show for years on end, it takes its toll. We can't all make a living watching classic TV shows from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, am I right? Hey, I'm lucky, I know. Well, for Dukes, by season 7 there was this sense of exhaustion behind the scenes. And personally, I think it started to show on screen too. And I'm not even talking about like exhausted plot lines yet, I just mean that the cast and crew were getting burned out. But the end of the Dukes of Hazzard, well, it was deeper than that. Sure, the fatigue did bleed into the writing and direction, the storylines became less creative, and the show's unique spark, well, it began to fade. You know, it's kind of like your favorite band. If they keep touring for years on end, well, they still might love the music, but they lose a bit of that initial magic, that spark. And for the Dukes, the creative engine was running on empty, and it flat out showed. But there was a big problem. If something makes money, networks are not gonna wanna drop it. And it's a big double-edged sword right there. You see, the thing is, we see the car and hear its name and we think, oh, this would never work today. But the general plot of Dukes, it's pretty timeless, and it's very marketable. Let's face it, we all love the underdogs. That's why we love March Madness, and we love watching those underdogs win over the sleazy elites. And that's the bones of the Dukes of Hazzard. That's what the boys did, along with a lot of fun explosions and car chases and action-y scenes. It's just some good old boys who obey no one but themselves. And that popularity plus the network continuing its runtime, well, it kinda meant the downfall. Well, the higher-ups, they wanted this thing to stay marketable to as wide an audience as possible, and yeah, you know what that means. Making it more kid-friendly, more family-friendly, and yeah, the kids ate that stuff up. I didn't exactly grow up in this series like some other people did, but I do remember liking it and thinking, man, this is exactly what younger me would have loved. Well, the executives saw their demographic was expanding to include those little ones, and so they had to make sure they kept that demographic accessible. So that meant, well, softening some of Bo and Luke's rougher edges, and for the longtime fans, it just didn't even feel like the same show. But you still watched it, or did you not? Surely this fatigue stuff could have been fixed with a revamp of the show while sticking true to its original premise. But did other forces at work really put Dukes of Hazzard on borrowed time? And do we have the cast that we all loved, the cast that brought this show to life, actually to blame? Declining ratings and changing tastes. Follow the money is usually about political corruption, but it's also a pretty handy phrase here.
Not to disturb me while I'm meditating at my shrine.
And I don't mean for some sleazy scheme that Hogg cooked up. I mean it's just a fact. The higher-ups love the higher profits. Which, yeah, that's fair, but that also means it doesn't mean squat just how much any of us love something. It just means how much it makes. To the higher-ups, it doesn't matter how many people got inspired by a character or learned good lessons. What matters is how much the viewership put in their wallet. Yeah, we've heard this song before, more like a eulogy, I guess, but by the mid-1980s, the Dukes of Hazzard just wasn't pulling in the same numbers that it used to. The early seasons, well, they were huge hits, up there in the top 10 highest rated shows in the country. But as the series went on, the numbers began to slide. But we do need to look at these ratings as a symptom of some other cause. And in this case, one of the big ones was the TV tastes were changing. What was fresh and exciting in 1979, it just didn't have the same appeal by 1985. General audiences were starting to crave more complex, narrative-driven shows, and the Dukes of Hazzard, with its formulaic Dukes vs. Hog structure, it just began to feel a little repetitive, I think. Don't get me wrong, this was comfort TV, I know. More like a familiar pair of boots, like if a bowl of popcorn was a television show, just good old relatable stuff. But yeah, it had a checklist it could be filled out each episode. And while the Dukes stayed more stagnant, some others strutted their new, refreshing stuff. Seriously, the competition was getting fierce. We're talking Magnum PI, Miami Vice. They began to make waves with their more sophisticated plots and their stylized action. They could fully lean into that cool, edgy, deeper identity. And we know that the Dukes of Hazzard wasn't reaching its full potential thanks to staying kid-friendly. So put those two issues together, and suddenly the innocent, family-friendly hijinks of Hazzard County, it seemed way old-fashioned. The Dukes, they just couldn't keep up, and as ratings fell, the network began to look for an exit strategy. And at that same time, part of the show's core team put together a strategy of their own, but it maybe cost everyone everything. Censorship pressure and controversies. I'm not the first, and I won't be the last to say that yeah, parts of Dukes of Hazzard would raise more than a few eyebrows today. And for quite a wide variety of reasons. I'm not even just talking about the General Lee, which still is a talking point online. Hop into any fan forum and you'll see diehard Dukes fans arguing both sides of the car debate. But no, Dukes of Hazzard had other content that was totally separate from that kind of stuff. By the mid-1980s, those good old boys weren't just catching heat from Boss Hogg. They got into trouble with advocacy groups and parents who felt the show's content wasn't suitable for younger viewers. Remember those epic car jumps and the wild stunts? I mean, yeah, they were awesome. But some people argue that they were encouraging dangerous behavior behind the wheel. The show faced increasing pressure to tone down the car chases and crazy stunts that fans loved. Like I said, to make it kid-friendly. Another issue was morality. One time, CBS programming director B. Donald Grant spoke with a room full of critics, and they didn't have a single good thing to say about the show. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say spoke. It's more like he listened to a bunch of critics eviscerate the show. At the heart of their complaints was, quote, "The two male leads appear to be on the wrong side of the law, that the subject of illegitimate parenthood was treated humorously, and that one of the female regulars is often seen in skimpy costume." Huh, I wonder who that regular was, Daisy? So yeah, not huge fans, I guess. Which itself is a pretty interesting point, cause the Dukes came at just the right time when Americans were kinda side-eyeing corrupt law enforcement.
What this fine man has done is illegal.
Laws can be changed.
I found one discussion forum that basically laid it all out, how tough crackdowns on civil rights movements really got viewers wanting to see the underdog win over the people abusing power. That sort of plotline, you know. And Dukes of Hazzard rode that wave at the start of its run, but after a bit things simmered down and circled back around. And now, well, viewers aren't so sure about watching these two criminals doing their thing once a week and beating these goofy goons. It just wasn't a clean-cut setup you could either write off as way too mature for youngsters or totally sugary sweet like a trip to Mayberry. And while the Dukes never bothered with labels or getting put in a box, TV critics and concerned parents definitely were. And with that pressure came more constraints on the writers and stunt coordinators, which made it really hard to deliver the same adrenaline-pumping action that the show was famous for. And this again, the viewers felt. Like this one forum talking about how different Dukes of Hazzard would be if it was made in the 2020s. One mega fan pointed out just how much they toned everything down to play it safe. Well, now we know why, the outside pressure. And yeah, even in the 1980s, the General Lee got some raised eyebrows too. So yeah, there was that working against them. But also another issue was the Southern plots. Some people, a lot of Southerners, took real issue with how the South was portrayed, saying that the show was all playing on Southern stereotypes that the locals might not be too keen on. Like, okay, here, Hollywood Reporter's got a quote from one North Carolina critic that said the show's setting was completely, and I quote, out of line with the New South. Sometimes what feels obnoxious in the past can be a fun source of laughter years later. So hey, I'm actually curious here. If you're a fan of Dukes of Hazzard and you live in the South, what did you think of how they played the South?
If chicken liver here will get out of my way, little ain't it? Oh, chicken shoot!
Was it over the top? Was it funny? Was it insulting? Regardless, even the Dukes show had a reputation as wily as the two of them were. And this 1-2 combo of controversy put the show under a lot of scrutiny, which isn't great for long-term survival. But the biggest blow would come from the show's biggest strength. The contract dispute drama. Close your eyes for just 1 second, and when you do, I want you to think of the first thing that comes to mind when I say Dukes of Hazzard. Okay, open your eyes. I know most of you said Catherine Bach and her Daisy Dukes. Yeah, some others said Tom Wopat and John Schneider, but the whole point only works if people thought of them. Help me out, guys. And while our two leads have absolutely gone on to do other really cool stuff, really successful stuff, there's no denying it, but Dukes of Hazzard, of course, it's their kingmaker.
Which is worse? Having one blow up when you don't want it to, or not blow up when you do?
Well now, imagine Dukes of Hazzard, but no John or Tom. You just can't do it, right? Well, that's how we had to live for an entire year when season 5 came around. And personally, that's when the hourglass began draining for good for the good old boys and their moonshine smuggling pals. See, it all comes right back around to cold, hard cash. You can't live with it, you can't live without it. Well, John and Tom knew they were the face of the show. They put in all the work to draw the fans in with their charisma and wit and cool bridge jumping car stunts. But in 1982, the two stars found themselves at odds with Warner Brothers Studios. Their contracts were up, and now they wanted a bigger slice of the pie when it came to merchandising revenue. Personally, that's understandable, considering how much money the Dukes of Hazzard merch made. We're talking lunchboxes, toys, t-shirts. I mean, the General Lee alone, it became an icon. But the studio didn't agree. More specifically, Warner Brothers refused to budge on 1 tiny cent. So Schneider and Wopat pulled the ultimate Dukes move and fired right back. How? Well, they moseyed right off the set. For a while, the studio thought they could carry on without the original Duke boys. They thought they could move on without the Duke boys. Exit Bo and Luke stage left, and enter cousins Coy and Vance Duke. Yay.
There's another thing that ain't changed. Same old Enid. Cool as all get out around the girls.
Now hey, I'm not gonna hate too much on these guys, but the pressure was on. They had to keep up the show's momentum. And yeah, let's be honest, the fans weren't having it. No hate on either of them, but Wopat and Schneider, they're just a tough act to follow. Seriously, if Warner Brothers offered me the gig, I'd dread taking it because you can't really replace those two. And Coy and Vance, they just didn't have that same spark, the same chemistry, and the ratings began to plummet. And so we need to know, get down in the comments section and tell me if you watched season 5 live. Did you watch Coy and Vance, or were you part of that ratings plummet? Well, the studio got the message loud and clear. Eventually, Warner Brothers caved. Bo and Luke returned, but I think, well, the damage was already done. The contract dispute left a sour taste in all their mouths. And even though the show did regain some ground, it never quite recovered to its former glory. I mean, you never want to have a misstep when you live year by year, hoping your magnum opus keeps getting the green light. Hey, good on them for getting what's owed, but it is what you call a Pyrrhic victory. Yeah, they won, but at a huge cost. Warner Brothers may have been convinced to give the Dukes what they wanted, but the network itself learned a totally different lesson that made salary disputes feel like a dream. The network's decision, and the final nail. We've said it before in this video and others, but for better and for worse, TV shows are a numbers game. What's making money? Who's tuning in? What audience is most profitable? And how do we maximize that audience? For CBS, the Dukes of Hazzard was all about managing a battle on multiple fronts. CBS, which aired the Dukes of Hazzard, was going through its own changes in the mid-1980s. The network, well, they decided to shift its focus towards new shows and different types of programming. Dukes continued to struggle with ratings and controversy. Basically, not all press is good press. And CBS decided that it just wasn't worth it anymore, and it's better to pull the plug and move on to the next idea. So, they announced the 7th season would be the final one. In the end, the Dukes of Hazzard wrapped up in 1985, not with a bang, but with a bittersweet farewell. And just like that, the beloved show, The Dukes of Hazzard, was off the air. Done kaput. It takes a lot of something special to make a series that I think John Schneider put it best when he said, quote, "Dukes of Hazzard was a unifying force. Mom, grandma, everyone wanted to watch it together. And yeah, I agree, but for how much controversy it generated when it first ran, and the controversy that still continues today, they cooked up a meal that had all of us sitting at the table to eat, and they did it for 7 seasons. Honestly, the odds were against them, until finally the Dukes couldn't outrun Hogg, and Hogg, well, was the executives at CBS. There you have it, folks. The Dukes of Hazzard didn't just end for one reason. It was a perfect storm of contract disputes, changing TV tides, controversy, burnout, and a daring stunt by the show's most famous faces. But we still see Bo, Luke, and Daisy roaring down those dirt roads from time to time in that General Lee, whenever we find a rerun, or when we think back on the good old days. And maybe that's the best ending a show can have. One that keeps us smiling long after it's gone off the air. So, what's your favorite Dukes of Hazzard moment? Best car chase, favorite brother? What did you think of that Coy and Vance season 5? And finally, do you think the Dukes of Hazzard could have continued for a season 8? Get down below in the comment section and tell us all your memories of watching the Dukes of Hazzard. Who'd you watch it with? Because after all, we here at Do You Remember, well, we're nothing without you. So let's remember together. If you enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up icon. Make sure you're subscribed. But most importantly, from my entire team here at Do You Remember, we want to thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day. We'll see you next time. Peace, y'all.